How much of your trash and recycling do you think actually gets either recycled or composted in the city?
Yeah, 0%.
Yeah, I know for a fact my recycling bin and trash bins get mixed together.
I don't know how true this is, but I heard a rumor that Philadelphia doesn't actually recycle.
I would say less than 50% if I had to guess.
Yeah.
I fully believe that it all goes to the same place.
I think composting 0, just self-thought, and I think I've seen them put the trash and recycling in the same truck.
Yep.
So
that happens.
I think maybe 50%.
I was hopeful it was 100%.
I don't think I'd be very optimistic there, maybe 10%.
My guess is probably 40% or 30 or 40%.
All right, it's a good guess. It's way
What
below
is
that,
it?
sadly.
Okay, I knew you were going to say that.
I know, it's
What
a
is
bummer,
it?
right? It's 12%. Yeah, 11 or 12%.
Okay.
Hey, that was pretty good. You win the prize.
That was just a wild guess.
Yeah. Welcome to the Circle Up podcast, where we tell the stories of the circular economy in Philadelphia.
Well, so let's circle up.
I'm Candice Lawton, Executive Director of Circular Philadelphia.
And I'm Sam Wittchen, co-founder of Circular Philadelphia.
In the first episodes, we heard all about how companies like Divert and Rabbit Recycling are working to improve recycling in the city. But that's just one facet of the circular economy.
And if you missed it, the circular economy is a smarter way to approach how we make, use, and dispose of materials. It's a continuous loop where we design out waste, keep materials in circulation through reuse, repair, and sharing resources, and at the end of their life, recycle them or break them down into their component parts to be used for the next products.
So circular economy is not a new concept. It's really a return to the way we used to do things before we had single use. So nowadays when we walk into a supermarket, you're gonna see a lot of plastic, right? Plastic bottles on the shelves, flexible plastic packaging that your chips and your snacks come in. But before World War II, a lot of things were still being made in metal, glass. When you walked into a supermarket, almost everything was packaged in glass, or you were going to a local market and bringing your own containers, or you had your milk delivered to your doorstep in a glass bottle, and you would drink that milk, put the milk bottle out, the milkman would come pick that bottle up, take it, get washed, and it would go back into the system. So this is not a new idea. It's more so taking a look at how we are buying, selling, distributing goods and today, and shifting back to some of those ways that we used to do things where we weren't so reliant on single use and disposable packaging. So in a circular economy, again, products and materials are kept in circulation through maintenance, reuse, refurbishment, remanufacture, and it's really based on 3 core principles. So eliminating waste and pollution, circulating products and materials to their highest value, and regenerating nature. How we got where we are today as far as being in a linear economy where, we're extracting resources, refining them, making them into things, using those things very briefly, and then just burying and burning them. A lot of it was, population growth, a lot more people in places, trying to figure out how to get goods to people. I think a big part of it is business, right? And businesses trying to come up with new ways to have a sustainable business model. It's like, okay, we can make something and we can mass produce that and distribute it to people, and the more and more people buying more and more things, that's continual growth. So that's like a viable business model. I don't know, I'm curious what Sam has to say on this topic too, because I have a lot of other ideas, but I want to see what you have to say.
Well, certainly the live convenience was one of the big ones after World War II, and we saw the rise of the larger supermarket chains and the idea that you could just grab something and go, and the rise of the plastic industry at the same time. The confluence of those things really changed what people thought that they needed to do as far as their day-to-day lifestyle, and the modern woman wanted a convenient lifestyle where they could go to the grocery store and they could get their goods easily and they didn't have to worry about their containers and bringing them back. And then we see that the plastic industry really explodes and creates this opportunity for these single-use packaging options.
Yeah, actually, as you were talking, I was thinking about this advertisement I saw that's from Time magazine way back in the day, and it's like a black and white photo of a family having a picnic, and they basically just pulled the picnic blanket up and shook it out, and all of the disposables are flying up in the air, and everyone's like, yeah, disposables, like we just had a picnic and we're gonna throw all this stuff away and no work for mom. Because I think you bring a really good point. At that time, the house, like the roles of the household were changing. The roles of women in the household were changing too. And historically it was like woman would maintain the household, do all the cooking, cleaning, shopping. And now it's like, okay, mom wants to also have a job. It's supporting, like, while dad is out in fighting in a war. Now it's so much more convenient and quick and easy to have these disposable materials and, celebrate not having all that work. But we would probably look on that image, right, in horror now to think about just like celebrating all this trash being created. And yeah, I mean, plastic industry is such a big part of it, right? Like plastic is not an old thing. It's still relatively new, even though it's so ubiquitous and everywhere. It's only really been around for 50 or 60 years now. And with plastic, it's kind of a paradox because the very same things that make plastic so usable, that it's durable, it's flexible, it can handle high temperatures, it's lightweight, it's relatively inexpensive to produce, are the same exact qualities that make plastic so hard to get rid of, right? And turn back into new things.
Plastic is a petroleum product, so it comes from oil. And it's everywhere. Plastic bottles, yes, but also things like food packaging, beauty products, cars, and even the vast majority of clothing.
Yeah, and it's convenient, and it's ultimately what's made so many of those things more affordable, but at what cost? Plastic is now covering our planet. It's degrading into microplastics, which are little flakes of plastic that are like a nanometer in size, that have been found now in the human body, in our bloodstreams. It's having health impacts. It's leaking into nature where it's harming animals. And as we're learning these consequences to this convenient plastic packaging, one way to eliminate these impacts is to avoid it. So we can opt for complete package-free products, or we can use materials that are inert and infinitely reusable, materials like glass.
I'm Daly, and we are in Reusables, which is the refill shop in the Northern Liberties. Reusables actually started off in 2019. I was looking to make something out of the jeans that I had worn through the thigh. You get to a certain point where you wear through the thigh and you can't really do anything with them anymore, regardless of how you mend them. And I always felt really bad about that because I was like, it's a ton of material still there. That's really obnoxious. So I started making cutlery pouches that were for travel cutlery out of them. And then in addition to that, tote bags and various other things. So in 2019, I'd done a couple of craft shows. I was feeling really confident, getting some wind in my sails. And at the beginning of 2020, I was like, hey, job, I'm going to pursue this full time. Bye. And then my last day was right when I worked at a grocery store, and it was right when people started panic shopping, and I was like, what had I done? And all of the markets that I'd lined up for that year told me they were pulling the plug. And fortunately, because I was sewing stuff and there was a huge PPE shortage, I started sewing masks. And as I was doing that, because it was kind of a critical need, I was able to sell at farmers markets. And I started adding in some other items that were like the reusable paper towels, the denim cutlery stuff. And it just kind of grew and grew from there until I kind of decided to fast track my my dream to have a refill shop. But I didn't want to have a storefront right off the bat, so we decided to do it mobily so we could keep people safe in the outdoors and continue to do farmers markets and pop-ups. So I bought a full-size cargo van, and my father-in-law helped me outfit the back of it with cabinetry. Actually, that's cabinetry from the van. We managed to save it for the shop after we sold the van. But he helped me outfit it with cabinetry so that I could put big gallons of laundry detergent, dish soap, all the things that we have, or not all of them, but a majority of the things that we have for refill in the shop who were just in the back of the van. And I would just drive the van to farmers markets. We would set up and kind of operate much in the same way that we operate the store. So we started with the van, and that grew into this. So customers are always welcome to bring any container that they have at home. It just has to be clean, dry, and empty. So it can be glass, it can be aluminum, it can be plastic. Plastic is a little bit more difficult to get fully dry, so I usually recommend glass, but it's not a deal breaker if it's not. And then when they come in, they'll weigh it, write down the tare weight so we know how much to subtract at the end. They'll fill however much or little they want, and then we subtract the empty weight from the total weight so we know how much the weight of the product is, and they just pay for the weight of the product. I think that it can seem a little bit daunting. So part of the reason that we always walk people through on the first time is so that we can set up the rules, like making sure that people know that the container has to be clean, dry, and empty, but also to make sure that somebody knows that there's like a person that they can ask questions to. Because I think sometimes people feel really self-conscious asking questions, even though it's like literally my job to be here to answer questions. So I never want people to feel like they can't ask something. But I think there are certain elements to refilling that, like, it's not convenient, right? You have to make sure that your containers are clean and empty. You have to make sure that you have the time to come in and write down the tare weight and like go and fill it and have like a more timely or like time-consuming interaction, which is part of why we started doing pre-filled stuff so that people can come in and grab what they need and get out, rather than having, like, especially if you've got your kids coming in here with them and like, you know, the kids are touching everything and like you're keeping an eye on them to make sure they don't pump liquid all over the floor. So we tried to bridge that gap, to make it a little bit easier, to make it a little bit less time consuming. And we're working on a system for people to return those containers to us so that we can wash them and reuse them again and maintain that circularity in our packaging as well. But yeah, I do think that there's an element of fear and an element of not really being sure how to manage the inconvenience of it. But once you get into a flow of it, I don't think it's as inconvenient as people think. I think that the people who shop here, mostly people who are down for the mission, like they are invested in trying to do some small part and feel like they are actively contributing towards a less wasteful or a less environmentally damaging lifestyle. And yeah, a lot of people are people with children, so I think that there's some element of it that is like, I want to do better so that my kids have a better place to live than like maybe we're headed for now. Some of them are people who've been shopping with me from early days of the van. They would like show up when it was raining, where I'd be like, okay, you're a real ride or die. Like, I don't know if I'd be out here in this weather, but I'm here too, so we're doing this. So we have a number of ways that we determine what we're gonna sell in the shop. Number one is like the need, like, right, people need hand soap and dish soap and laundry detergent. They're the things that you use every day and the things that you're kind of constantly buying in a new bottle. And like also no one's selling laundry detergent in a glass bottle. It's just all the bad packaging. So we kind of look at what do people need, and then to find the vendors that we want to work with, we do a lot of research to find ones who are selling in the format that we want. So when it comes to vetting the vendors that we use and the ingredients that we use, we look for a couple of different things. One is, I hesitate to say clean ingredients because that doesn't really mean anything. We have a list of ingredients that we don't allow in any of the products. There's no parabens, no phthalates, no sulfates, no palm oil, no artificial colorants, we don't outlaw fragrance oils full stop, but we do really look into which fragrance oils and making sure they're high quality fragrance oils. And then also we try and partner with small businesses as much as possible because it's an easier way to make sure that there's like an ethical supply chain and, you know, for instance, make sure that we can send drums back to them or, you know, have a circular economy, not only in people refilling here, but also in terms of the packaging that we're receiving going back and being reused. So it varies vendor to vendor. The vendor that we buy like hand soap, dish soap, and laundry detergent from, that arrives to us in 30-gallon drums. And then when we accumulate 8 empty drums, we just shoot them a message like, hey besties, we have 8 drums, please send them to pick them up XOXO. And then we strap them down to a pallet and they arrange for the transporter to come and pick them up from us so that they can go back to their facility, be washed out, sanitized, and reused and resent out. There are other vendors that aren't quite as circular but still have like a recycling scheme in place. For instance, the people that we buy the conditioner, shampoo, body wash, and lotion from, send them in 2.5-gallon bags. And those get sent back to them for appropriate recycling. And then we have some local vendors that we get buckets swapped out. But sometimes I just give those away because people need buckets all the time, so. So many of the non-refill, like specifically things in bar form, I think kind of actually speak to a refill moment, because if you think about where the issue is with a lot of these products, is that the packaging that you receive them in is usually plastic. And for liquids, it kind of has to be plastic because there's not a ton of really suitable solutions that are good for shipping in mass. But when it comes to a bar, like a shampoo bar, a bar of soap, a dish block, which is a solid form dish soap, those are all products that function in the same way as those ones that you would normally refill. But because there's no water being shipped and there's no need for plastic packaging, it really reduces not only the packaging burden, but also the shipping emissions, because it's lighter. You're not shipping the weight of the liquid. So those, I mean, the ingredients criteria are still very much the same for all of those items. And then the items that are more like, sponges or the paperless towels, it's kind of like if we have something where somebody is routinely throwing it away. Number one, is there a solution that is compostable rather than a plastic version? So sponges are cellulose fiber, which is completely compostable, whereas a normal sponge is polyester. So when that's done, you're just straight landfilling it. And we have a bunch of items that are compostable or biodegradable versions of plastic or kind of sneaky plastics in your life. And then we also have various items that are just kind of meant for household cleaning. So we've got scrubbers, we've got, what else we got? We just got in squeegees, we got fly swatters, we got just things that you would normally use around your house. And some of them are, at this point, kind of things that people who are looking to give a sustainable gift end up giving a housewarming gift. So it's all things you would use around your house. We've got some lovely candles from the local candle maker, things like that. So our perspective or our philosophy is kind of that it is better to prevent the trash from being created in the first place than to try and find a recycling solution for it, because recycling isn't a great system. It's not a perfect system for sure. It's not even really approaching perfect system in a lot of cases, especially as it relates to plastic. So our philosophy is just, if you don't have to create it in the first place, then that really removes a lot of that from ever having to be dealt with. So even in the case of our shampoo and conditioner things that are coming in these 2.5-gallon bags, even though those are being recycled rather than reused, they fill approximately 20 16-ounce bottles. So if you think about the amount of plastic that's generated with that bag versus how much plastic would be generated in those 20 bottles, even though that's being recycled, it's a better system than one where you're trying to recycle all of those bottles individually. Glass is really great in that it is infinitely recyclable. It can be crushed down, it can be reblown. It is a great product for that. The issue though, however, is that much like all recycling, only a certain amount that goes into those recycling bins really gets recycled, which is a large part of why we partner with Bottle Underground, because they're local. We can make sure that the glass is going to be appropriately recycled. But aside from the convenience of it, plastic is really, in terms of its creation and in terms of packaging, one of the, I don't want to say better options, but it's lightweight. It's not breakable. There's all these, it's like a waste product from the fossil fuel industry. There's all these reasons why it's great on the front end and it's just terrible on the back end. And I think a large reason was kind of highlighted a couple of years ago when we were just exporting so much of the trash that we were creating into these less wealthy countries and having them kind of manage our trash and recycle it there. But then how much of that recycling ends up being recycled? It's pushing off our waste onto less wealthy countries. And I feel that's kind of a human rights issue. In addition to that, the plastic just never goes away. It never goes away. So even if it's staying in this country, it's still if it's not actually getting recycled, which a vast majority of the plastic created here is not, it's gonna be in those landfills for centuries. It's gonna be eaten by birds. I was reading an article the other day that was so soul crushing about birds in this remote island where they crinkle. You touch them and they crinkle because they've ingested so much plastic. And it's just like, it's devastating to see that like this wildlife is just like really suffering at our expense because we have to be convenienced at all times. I think that on the whole, Philadelphia is a city that's really ready to be green. Like, people here really want to invest in these green initiatives. They really want these programs. I think that for customers, the challenging parts are just, it's like, it requires an extra step of planning. The thing that I have found people have most success with is that if you have rather than bringing the container that you are dispensing from at your sink or in your shower or whatever, a lot of people will have a backup container, and that lives under their sink. It lives wherever. It's maybe just a kombucha jar that you washed out. And that way you can label what it is, and when you empty it, you wash it immediately, and you put it in your refill bag. And that way you can look in there and say, cool, I don't have any hand soap under the sink. I know I need to get hand soap now. So that's one strategy that I've seen really work well for people. I personally hate the phrase zero waste because I think that it is an impossible standard to hold anyone to. I certainly don't hold myself to the standard of making absolutely no waste. But I think that it's like the catchiest and easiest thing to say. But aiming to live a lower waste lifestyle, I think, is like a more accurate depiction, because maybe someday you're gonna be out and you're gonna be like, I am so tired and I don't have my reusable cup with me and I need a latte right now. It's okay. Get the latte. Maybe you're depressed and you're like, I literally can't cook anything. I'm gonna get takeout. Love that for you, babe. Do it. Live your life in a way that makes sense, and then reduce the waste where you can so that you don't have to feel as guilty about the places where you can't. I think that there's no one right place to start. So usually when somebody comes in and says, I want to do zero waste, how do? I will say, like, you know, when you go home, over the next week, over the next 2 weeks, over the next month, take a look at what is going into your trash can. You can start there. Take a look, like, okay, I need to replace this thing. How are you gonna, like, look at the things in your house that you're like, I know that this is made of plastic, I know this is packaged in plastic, whatever. When you start getting to the end of those products, replace them gradually, rather than trying to do a full sweep at once is nobody's friend. Like, that can't be maintained, I think. I think it's really, really difficult. If you're looking to start with refills, I would start with hand dish and laundry detergent. You're likely to go through them the fastest. And then, like I said, as you start to run through, like, all the sponges are gone. When you start to run through your paper towels, you can start to see, like, what can I swap out that is a more sustainable option here? And that way it feels more manageable. Well, I'm not religious, but the thing that I always like to say to myself and to my husband is, like, okay, God and the environment forgive you. Like, you know, you're absolved. Like, we try and make solutions. Like, we offer these recycling programs, not because they're of great convenience to us, but because we know that they're the things that really make an impact for people and make them feel like they are doing something. Bottle Underground came first. When we first opened the store, I knew that they had a program running like this with Goodbye Supply. So I reached out and said, like, hey, I know that, like, we're maybe, like, closer to a lot of people, because South Philly, to drop it at the Bach or to drop it with Goodbye, it's kind of a hike from here to there. So they set us up with these crates. They come once a week to pick up. And then the glass that they pick up is either washed and sanitized for repurchase. Like, our 64-ounce growlers are actually old kombucha growlers. Yeah. And I know that there's other packaging that they sell to other vendors, like Melissa from Bellum Street Soaps buys some of her packaging from them as well. Our partnership with Rabbit came afterwards, and it was just me trying to think about, like, what can I do to lessen this burden on people? Like, what can I do for all these things that just accumulate, like the kipple that you generate in your day-to-day life? And so when we talked to them, I was like, what are some of the things that you see most frequently in the boxes? Because if you don't know, they do like a swap, like a single stream niche recycling swap program. And so they gave me like their like junk drawer list of like bread tags, rubber bands, twist ties, produce nets, the wires and cables. And we picked like, I think 8 different ones to start off with. And then eventually we did a flexible plastics collection, which we asked them about how to pre-sort for them so that we could kind of lessen the burden on them once they got it. So the glass the shop pays for, the flexible plastics, and the niche recycling with Rabbit, we will get an invoice from them for the cost to recycle those items. And then once we get that, we'll say like, hey friends, this is how much it costs this month. If you would like to donate to help fund this, this is how to do so. And we've been really fortunate that the whole time that we've been doing it, it's been fully funded by the community the whole time. So I think what I do think is really cool that Circular Philly is doing, and I think kind of unique to Circular Philadelphia, is it's not exclusive to business owners. It is something that is connecting business owners, average citizens, like people who are just interested in sustainability and circularity in a way that I don't really know that another organization is necessarily. Because I know that the SBN is strictly focused on business ownership and sustainable businesses in the Philadelphia region. So I think that is a really cool and really successful thing that Circular Philadelphia is doing. It would be really cool if there was some kind of metric for sustainability that was certifiable, or like a zero waste certifiable kind of thing, like, you know, low waste or X number of waste. Ideally, I think it would encourage more businesses to implement sustainable practices and therefore be rewarded for them. Like, I don't, like, you know, we can have a carrot. Just a little carrot to encourage everyone. But yeah, I do think that there is a level of what I like to call eco-nihilism, where people eventually say nothing matters, and no matter what I do, the planet is doomed, and we're all going to die in the climate wars, and you know, maybe. But I think that the eco-nihilism is really easy to give into. I think as long as I think that those feelings are valid. You know, I think that it's valid to feel really distraught and upset about what's happening in the world and just like, you know, our part in it and larger society's part in it. But I think that individual actions do still matter. Honestly, I'm really lucky because I'm somebody who like gets to just work my job, and people say, thank you so much for being here. I'm so glad you're here. Like, I've been looking for a shop like this. So I feel like that's kind of where it comes for me, is the gratitude that I get to experience from people, because I know in that situation that it's something that's really valuable and important for them, and that they have seen some impact in their life from it.
That was Ray Daly from Ray's Reusables, a low-waste shop located in Northern Liberties.
My name is John Kispolsky, and I live in Northern Liberties. I've been a customer of Ray's Reusables for about 6 months. I've definitely introduced a bunch of my friends to Ray's Reusables, and what I tell them is essentially like, hey, this is a great store. Everyone is so friendly. All of the products are amazing, as well as the fact that everything is just good for the environment and good for your body. It's a great way to replace products that you use on the day-to-day with things that are just even better for you and for the world. As for the recycling services, I definitely have dropped off a few things here and there for recycling, and I love the fact that even something as small as my contact lens cases have a place to be recycled at Ray's store.
My name is Sophia, and I live in Old City, Philadelphia. I've been a customer at Ray's Reusables since January of 2022. I decided to use Ray's Reusables because I hate waste. I really do not like single-use anything. And any way that I can reduce my footprint and make less of a wasteful impact on the environment, I want to pursue. So the benefits of using services at Ray's Reusables are obvious, right? We're reducing waste, we're reducing our, consumption, we're reducing what goes into the landfill. That's the no-brainer. But the personal benefit to me is Ray herself. She's just a joy. Every time I go into the store, it's like being with a friend, and it's great to have a friend in the business that can help me to try to do better. I think just having Ray in our community is a big benefit.
One of the cool things about Ray's shop is that the glass bottles you find there are reused as well. Ray is one of the customers of Philadelphia's only glass recyclers, Bottle Underground. As Ray mentioned, you can drop off glass for recycling at the shop, but what happens after it leaves Northern Liberties?
Hi, I'm Rebecca Davies from Remark Glass and Bottle Underground. Remark Glass is a recycled glass design studio, so we do glass recycling and glass blowing. Remark Glass makes recycled glass homeware and gifts. So we think about how our design passion can be included in a home. So we like to make useful things. The three founders of Remark Glass are myself, my business partner Danielle, and then my partner Mark. We all three have a glass background, so we were fabricators. Our work histories are in making things out of glass. We were interested in really creating our own design language and kind of getting our creativity to the people, right? We wanted to see things that we had come up with go into production and then be accessible. The recycled glass component of it was almost happenstance. We were thinking, all of us were new parents, all of us had just lost our workforce participation, right? We were not employable as new parents for the most part, and we were thinking like, what do we actually have access to that we can bring our skill set to and accomplish that goal? So over the course of a few years, we were able to really develop methods for taking bottles and glass literally out of recycling and reforming that material with the skills we had already developed into the products that you now can find on our website and up on our media and everything like that. So cups, glasses, vases, but we do have a huge segment of our business that we say is for ceremonial and celebratory glass. So we're thinking about gifts, often from somebody's wedding or retirement, where they can send us a bottle from their event, or we do have some ceremonial things where it's like a little breaking glass that you would mazel tov at the wedding, and we can do products from there. So to really kind of encapsulate the keepsake part of glass, you can see those products up on our website and just keep an eye out for what we're working on. It really has to do with what the glass looks like when we see it and then what we think we can make from there. We're a little bit unique in our field in that we do use 100% recycled glass, so we don't add anything to it. We just make that glass into our product line. We're in Philly or in Philadelphia, and if you live here, if you're in a residence, you likely have access to single stream recycling. So you have a blue bin. The city comes around weekly and collects that blue bin from you. You most likely are well behaved and you think about what could go in that blue bin, what the city says can go in that blue bin, and you do your best to make sure that the things you put in that blue bin are on the list. Then the truck comes, right? The truck comes to your house every single week and it collects everything you put in that blue bin and instantly destroys it. Immediately crushes it in the compacting side of the truck into what I think of as like mush or smithereens. And every single thing in that truck becomes a little bit less valuable because of that step. However, if I'm thinking like a city, I might be thinking, well, how many trucks do we need? How much traffic does this cause? How many households are they going to serve in one day, in one route, in one load? So it's a quite effective way to move material from the sidewalk of every single residence in Philadelphia every single week to its next life. It is, however, ineffective at recovering materials. Glass, I think it's really important to just like fully back up like this, right? Like glass is recyclable. It is something that you can take it and reheat that material and modify that material or move that material and remake something. In fact, when you ask most people what is recyclable, they think about glass, right? A bottle can be melted and it can become another bottle. Awesome. Additionally, glass is really important for a different reason that I think is becoming people are becoming more and more aware of. Glass is inert. It's the only material that's FDA approved to be sitting next to your food, meaning every other material is in fact poisoning you in some way, and we're all aware of this, right? That isn't a secret. Glass is inert. It's generally regarded as safe, which is a GRAS category in the FDA, and it is inert both as it interacts with you and your products, but also as it interacts as waste with the earth, right? So a glass bottle littered into the woods is just that. It's not going to cause micro things. It's not going to degrade the soil. It's going to be in there, not in the best location, but ultimately not causing more harm. So I say, like, it is reusable as well, right? Glass can easily be sanitized and reused. You do it every time you drink out of a glass cup in a restaurant. It's not the glass material that has a problem in our world and society. It is, in fact, the systems we have built are not a good fit for glass. And it goes right back to that chemistry, right? So there are a lot of different types of glass. There's windshield glass, grandma's crystal, my crystal, no, right? Bottle glass, solar panel glass, these things are chemically very different from each other. Medical glass, beakers, those aren't the same. There's different chemical components that go into the glass. Ultimately, the core of glass is made from sand. Sand makes glass. Glass then can be made back into sand. And that is its lowest life, in my opinion, is kind of going into a sand component or a downcycle component, but it isn't causing harm. So my understanding of our current system is that glass is now smithereens and will sort of fall, and there's not a whole lot of sorting on them. A windshield and a bottle are two different glasses. They won't ever be together, right? They're never gonna melt together. They don't wanna be together. They won't make anything except crackled glass if you try to do it, and it will be difficult. So because there's not a whole lot of separation at that point, almost all the glass, in my current understanding of Philadelphia's waste, goes out as what they call alternative daily cover. Alternative daily cover is used to cover a landfill for safety reasons every single day. So there's a need for the cover, but the glass itself is then lost to us, right? Every time I bought my jelly, I used my jelly, I had every intention of that jelly jar becoming more jelly jars, or at least a soda bottle. Now, that same jelly, when I go back to the store, got made from the sand, right? So bottle for bottle, every time I think, oh, I'm recycling this bottle, I'm actually digging a hole deeper somewhere to get more sand. Sand is an exploited resource, so everyone is getting sand from further away. So sand and a few other things from the earth would be melted to make new glass. It takes a lot of energy to make new glass. And every time a glass bottle, the way I think about it, it's like, okay, I go to the store, I buy my jelly, right? I eat my jelly, and then I take my glass and I put it into the recycling, and I feel great about it because glass is recyclable. Systems make that a little different than what we want it to be, and we can talk about where they break and how they break later, but for now I would just be like, okay, I feel good, I put it in the recycle bin. Hypothetically, that same jelly jar I would recommend, be refilled with jelly, right? So ideally, it would be washed and refilled with jelly. That's its highest use, right? Its second would be like, okay, we could take that same jelly jar and we could have it at a quality that's high enough that a manufacturer would remelt the jelly jar, and maybe it could be a soda bottle next. That is a huge difference between melting sand from raw materials and melting glass. So it takes much, much less energy because you've already sort of had the release of emissions from your original sand, and it just isn't as high of a temperature. It's already glass. You're remelting something instead of kind of getting it to its maximum possible temperatures so that it becomes something. The difference there, I don't have a data point handy, but it'd be easy enough to confirm it. It's pretty significant for a company that's melting a lot of glass. So every ton that they're adding in is a real live carbon and cost savings for the company. So there's an incentive from those companies to use recycled glass. Again, glass isn't the problem, right? Why they don't use glass well, why we don't recycle a lot of glass here in this country, it has everything to do with the systems that waste typically goes through. Glass is made for bottles to be really quick in manufacturing. So a lot of other studios might add additives that make it slow down so that they can use it by hand. It is difficult to work with from a chemical perspective, and just across the industry, it's not something that most people get trained to work with. So we've kind of worked for the past 10 years on how exactly we can make products out of this glass. There was so much interest in getting glass to Remark glass. It was like we'd be in the studio making glass and people would come in all day and be like, oh, I brought this for you. And we'd be like waving and saying thank you and like leaving it in the hallway for weeks and weeks. And then we were like, we need systems. We need better customer service. We really need to be thinking about these community members, what's motivating them, how big this problem is, and what a small company like ours can do to impact the overall field. Bottle Underground is our nonprofit. We decided to do a split in the business from an entity perspective so that we could be a little bit more community facing. I think of it in 3 programs. We take in glass donations, so people and businesses can donate their waste glass to Bottle Underground to divert it from landfill. We salvage glass, so that means we recover what we can from the donations to find the highest and best use of the material, again, to divert it from landfill. And then our 3rd program is our community program. So we're running our workforce and internship programs from there, but also our community outreach and our events. Bottle Underground is accepting glass from community members and running our collections route. So whether you're a part of a drop-off program here at Bottle Underground in South Philly, whether you're a part of a drop-off program up at some of our community partners like Raise Reusables, you're bringing your glass there, we're going to get it from there, and then we're going to bring it back here. The first thing we do is weigh your box. We take a little bit of information from you at that point or attribute it to where we just got it from. For example, the zip code of where you brought it from. And then, so we have your weight, we know where it came from. Then we're going to actually look at the box and decide which pieces of glass are better for which projects or markets as Bottle Underground has developed them. Approximately 10 to 15% will go on to Remark glass to become something else. Grows up to be something else, right? In a way that the glass has been upcycled or reheated, and its life will now be like, for example, my same jelly jar could hypothetically become a cup that I drink out of for the rest of my life, right? So it has a reuse life, but also not a single-use life in its format here at Remark Glass. We do take a certain amount or a certain percentage of glass that we like to call reuse. So there, it is a labor of love, absolutely, but we're thinking like, why does the jelly jar need to go into being sand? Why couldn't it be used by a business that would refill it with maybe not jelly, right? Maybe it's just laundry soap pods. And you're kind of using those containers for whatever our clients are selling. So we think about micro businesses. We talk to a lot of candle makers. We talk to a lot of body products and homeware or home product makers and manufacturers. So we see it as not only creating that feedstock for the local business, but ultimately stimulating the local circular economy, because what we're saying is, where would you have bought your candle jars? And where would they have been shipped from? And what would you have paid? And we are doing business here at Bottle Underground as if on fair market values. So we're thinking, okay, sounds good. Let's take away the shipping. Let's talk about how we can move forward from here. Let's talk about your margins. Let's make sure this works for you. And let's make sure we can do the number of jars. Like, you need 100 a month or you need 1,000. Most of our micro businesses in Philadelphia are not competing well on their packaging. They don't store pallets in their basement. They don't order from my major wholesalers that are shipping to our local in-city addresses. They're thinking, I do need the 100 a month. That's about how many candles I'm making. Yes, I make candles all year. Yes, I sell them mostly for the holidays, but now I have my inventory, right? And I've had my workflows make sense, and I don't need any pallets or deliveries on my sweet, sweet small block. So that's one way, part of your glass will go there. A lot of your glass is going to go to either one of our pilot programs, which we're developing to get glass truly remelted for recycling. So we have a couple of programs where clear glass will absolutely be remelted by one of our partners, and amber glass will be sent out to be remelted through a little bit of an intermediary, but it will ultimately go to a factory that's making amber bottles. If none of those things can be true for something that we found in your crate, then we will probably still take the time to sort it to the color section that it belongs in. If it's a green, it would go with greens. If it's a blue, it would go with blues. And then we'll pulverize it down into a sand so that, again, glass can become sand again. And that can, we say, more like a sand alternative for your creative uses, because there's a lot of things you can do with sand that you can also do with glass sand. For the most part, landscaping, which is involving either burying it. In Pennsylvania, you can use it for septic. You can use it in your plantings. It helps with the drainage and a few other things, but you can also just use it as a top dressing to beautify the planting. So Bottle Underground has our drop-off program. We accept the glass here. You can come from anywhere to do that. There's people coming from all over the place to drop off their glass here. And then there are a couple of neighborhood hubs where you can drop off glass. Raise Reusables is a great one. So if you are in there, take a look around the store, take a look around for how you can make small changes in your life. But ultimately, if you're dropping your glass there, you'll have an excuse to go in every few weeks and do that, right? You can drop off your glass, you can fill up your containers, and you can make some changes with Ray. Then we run our collections program. So our e-bikes do drive around the city to collect glass. We do have a route that goes up to Ray's and a couple of places around there. Those are the primary ways the glass gets here. You know, in terms of where it goes, I think that's also another bit of data that we look at. So for every person who's using glass here or buying glass from us for any reason, I'm thinking about that zip code too, right? A circular economy is material circular, but a local circular economy is really important to consider, right? Which zip code did the glass come from, and where is it then going? Right, so in a local circular economy, I'm thinking a community member delivered material here. We did our very best to create value for every part of that circle, meaning the next thing we did was hire someone to process the glass. So we created value by creating the job. Because we run workforce development, oftentimes those jobs are in zip codes that do not often come down to donate their glass. So we're creating value in often a disadvantaged neighborhood by creating a job, and ultimately leaving full control over that revenue or that earning to the person to say, I am using this money from my job to live my life how I choose. Then we're servicing that micro business, right? And she's thinking the same thing. So we sell our glass to these candle makers or to Raise Reusables, for example, to sell in the store, right? So now what we've done is we've hired somebody, we created that value, now we sold it locally. So again, if you think about that sale, it went from Raise to Bottle Underground, everybody benefited, and the value stayed here, right? So we've passed it again. Now Raise is selling it to her clients, probably local clients, probably helping that store, right, to make sure that they can choose the products that really bring value to the clients and not necessarily think about the containers. And that is the full circle, right? So we're thinking like, okay, this came out of the waste, it passed value through an employee, through a local business sale, through a storefront sale, and ultimately went on to a customer who, if they're at Raise, is probably thinking, what can I do as a person to improve these systems? That was the goal, right? To think like, how can we create value and then move it in a circle so that everybody who participates gets some part of the value that was donated here, right? The material itself is where the value comes from. It's an entirely different thought process than a smash truck full of things, right? They're thinking, okay, the problem is getting it off the sidewalk and we don't care about that value as much, right? We went with the opposite approach. So Raise is a good example of how we all interact to do that. So I would say even if you're not in one of our service areas directly, even if you're not able to get here, you may have participated in the creation of value in just the products that you're already purchasing, or in some of the glass that is being collected from community members in your area and getting brought to one of those locations. We do see community groups that will do their block, for example, and then somebody's going to Raise anyway and will drop off, or somebody's coming down to Bottle Underground anyway. So we've done that. I think there are plenty of ways to continue to include other businesses especially, and then residents and community members who really want to see improvement. One of the projects that I like to highlight is with Bennett Compost. So we started working together several years ago and worked with a landscape architecture firm, Olin, and their lab to think, how could waste be used to build this city, especially in thinking about landscaping and gardening. So over the course of years, they really developed, and we supplied both food waste compost and glass waste sand to work to create a soil that is also allowing plants to grow well and filtering the water appropriately for something like a rain garden. That's really cool to see, right? Because now we have this idea where, like, okay, so if the city is building something, if they're thinking about rain gardens on every block in a certain neighborhood, what would have happened, right? They would have then purchased organic material, which isn't something the city has extra of, from somewhere else, moved it into the city, made the rain garden, and instead of them relying on other places to be able to supply organics here for our ability to grow plants, we worked together to find a way to make it so that waste could be the primary ingredient in something that could then produce for the city, even in beautification, but also in filtration, which is a big deal. Bottle Underground itself isn't really in a position to be thinking we're going to serve every Philadelphia household, right? We're quite small. Our goal, our mission at Bottle Underground isn't serve every Philadelphia household. It's actually model the best possible glass recycling. So being small ends up being a bit of an advantage because we're thinking with the material that we got, what is the best use? And then we might be thinking about some of our clients who really could benefit from very small orders of glass. We're creating end markets for those materials, cultivating those markets, and becoming local feedstock for the material. However, I have some ideas about the best systems. They are entirely speculation. I believe, Bottle Underground believes, that the best way to move forward from a waste system in recycling for the people in a city as big as this one would look something like this. Number one, we would set up drop sites in every community so that every resident, and I would even stretch towards businesses that use these materials, would have access to drop sites that do in fact ask for them to separate materials, right? Glass goes with glass, cardboard goes with cardboard. At those drop sites, yes, the community member would do these things. They would put glass where glass goes. I imagine those sites would have many vendors like us, right? We would think about glass because we specialize in glass. Other Philadelphia businesses specialize in, for example, food waste, or batteries, or electronics, or hard to recycle materials. And I think that a single site in every neighborhood, ideally something that the city is involved with, like for example on city land, would be a great use of our community resources and the existing infrastructure in these very small businesses. So community members would go there. Secondly, each of our independent businesses would need to scale to be able to take on that much glass. I imagine Bottle Underground would need to, for example, build a facility that wasn't underground to be able to scale at that rate and take on that much glass from residents and businesses that produce it. So that would be my number two, so we would need drop sites in every community. We would need a place that we can process at that scale. Thirdly, and I have four. Thirdly, we would ask the city to contract us to do the work at the market rate for the material. So for example, my last check understanding is that recycling costs, I think they are about $70 a ton right now. So at $70 a ton, Bottle Underground could interact with that material, get it off the site, and process it in our new facility above ground to something that we can then sell at a market rate. The fourth thing that I would ask for is for the procurement department of the City of Philadelphia to mandate that recycled materials from the City of Philadelphia be purchased whenever possible from vendors like us so that we do develop end markets in addition to serving the people in their recycling needs. If you're thinking about recycling overall, there's a bunch of factors that affect it. Policy is one, right? So the systems that we have in place, a lot of them are policy driven, but end markets are the other. End markets, like I just described in glass recycling at a melter, at a manufacturer of bottles and things like that, they would want clean, recycled glass. However, our systems would need to be in place to sell it. I love that Philadelphians want better. In fact, I'll just say Philadelphians absolutely deserve recycling materials. It isn't optional, right? It is something that we should be able to do as a society, and it's something that each person shouldn't have to figure out different solutions for, right? It shouldn't be that every household is sitting there thinking, how can I change what happens to a service that I am paying taxes to cover? I want this for them. I love this about them. We started Bottle Underground so that we could continue to talk through how we would do this together. We can think differently. We can take the energy that a Philadelphian would have about their materials and the energy that got them all the way to us with their box, out of their way on an inconvenient time, midweek, most likely, when we're in operation, and what will change in our communities, right? How will this value bring us different results? And I just think it's going to take a lot of time, but I do see it happening. Bottle Underground has existed for 5 years. I wouldn't say we have grown necessarily in the way that like we're doing more and more and more tonnage every year, but we are selling more and more and more glass to more end markets that are useful. And because some of those programs started 5 years ago, we have seen candle makers grow. We have seen our stores grow. We have seen some of these pilots stay open long enough that the impact is worth talking about, right? We can say that there are tons of recycled glass being remelted for manufacturing from Philadelphia. No one could have said that 5 years ago, and no one but us, so far as I know, says it now.
That was Rebecca Davies from Remark Glass and their associated nonprofit Bottle Underground, located in South Philly but servicing all of Philadelphia.
My name is Kate, and I live in Philadelphia in Fishtown.
My name is Em. I live with Kate, also in Fishtown. We have been recycling glass with Bottle Underground, I think, probably since around I moved in with you, Kate, in 2021, I would say. And we do work with Bottle Underground through Reusables, who is a drop-off partner for them.
There was a little while before Rays started collecting them where pals in the neighborhood, we would like coordinate a drop-off and schedule one at Bottle Underground. So like one of us would just get a big IKEA bag or something and drive to a couple of houses and pick up everybody's peanut butter jars and wine bottles. One of the things that's hard about the glass recycling is that it is not an automated pickup, so it's a little bit more of a mental load and figuring out, like when are we going to take it, making sure that wherever we take it that they have the space to accommodate the drop-off, and also that in our house you just have to have a place to store the glass until you're full up on glass, so you have to figure out where you're going to put all that stuff until you're able to do a drop-off. I think it's important to me to recycle glass specifically because it is, of the materials that we recycle in Philadelphia, it's the one that can be infinitely recycled and reused. And I know that Philadelphia curbside pickup, even though it's great that it's a single stream system, I think the reputation, at least in Philadelphia, and what people see with their own eyes is that sometimes those recycling bins just get chucked in with the trash, so it doesn't always actually get recycled. So I wanted to start actually recycling those materials where I could.
Importance in glass recycling for me is, I think, fairly generic. It's like, again, the feedback of like having to lug your recycling bin through the row home alleyway before and after you start recycling your glass separately, and feeling how much lighter that bin is to drag down the alley.
And the fact that Rays does it, I love Rays as a business, and it's cool to not only bring our glass to Rays to recycle it, but at the shop there, sometimes Ray keeps the jars back and recycles them in the shop for community jar use. So when people come into the store and they maybe are sort of unprepared for what to do at a refill shop, they can access stuff right there.
Massive amount of peanut butter jars that we leave with Ray every few weeks.
Yeah, we do supply them with a steady stream of peanut butter jars that Ray, I think, has told us are one of the shop's favorite sizes and uses for jars. So yeah, happy to provide.
Thanks for listening to episode 2 of the Circle Up podcast. You can learn more about Raise Reusables and Bottle Underground by visiting their websites at raisereusables.com and bottleunderground.org. We have those sites and a whole lot more resources in the show notes.
Join us for episode 3, where we talk about the action that you can take that makes the biggest impact on climate change: composting.
The Circle Up podcast is presented by Circular Philadelphia. It was produced by Meredith Nutting at Cool Goon Productions. This podcast was supported by a grant from Penn Treaty Special Services District. If you want to learn more about the circular economy, go to circularphiladelphia.org.